Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior professional, originally from Belgium, now talking to us from Italy, Anouk De Blieck. Anouk, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh, for having me and for the wonderful introduction as well. So very happy to be here and, share some thoughts and insights to your broad audience. So looking forward to it.
So Anouk is a board advisor. She's a non-executive director and is focused on strategic human capital. So Anouk, before we talk about transformation and human capital, tell me in brief your journey, because before we started recording, you said you returned after 20 years to Europe.
Yes, so originally, as you mentioned, from Belgium, I've been very fortunate to kind of start my professional career traveling around. So I spent, I think, almost 3 decades, from which 20 years overseas in large organizations like Citi, ANZ, so was with Visa, was with SoftServe. So, and in fact, I've had the pleasure and the privilege to have locations across the world where I had those roles, going from the US to Melbourne and everything in between, mainly in HR roles, but also in business roles. So very fortunate. But at a certain point, Ashutosh, as you know, you get closer, it's time to come back. Getting closer to the family, and we chose we chose Italy as our base, right? To continue. Yeah.
How wonderful. And so let's move to talking a little bit about transformation and human capital. How do you define transformation?
Yeah. Well, it's lots of people talk about transformation, and it can probably mean for many different people different things. But I always kind of think about that quote that you probably know really well. It's not the species that is the most intelligent or the strongest that survives. It's the one that is the most adaptable to change.
Well said.
And the thing is that it resonates. It has always resonated with me because we live in a very, I would say, I always talk about the VUCA world, right? We live in unprecedented times, and change is there to stay constantly. But how do you as an individual or as an organization stay relevant? How do you future-proof yourself? And sometimes that's not just about, yes, you need to change and make some incremental changes, but sometimes you need to make step changes as well. So for me, transformation is this notion about how do you continue to reimagine yourself, be that better version that what you currently are, as an individual and as an organization, because that's the only way to stay relevant and to stay ahead of things. Otherwise, you might not stick around, right, and not survive.
Well said, well said. But the big challenge with transformation is that human beings like status quo.
Yeah.
And if possible, status quo ante.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you persuade leaders to transform?
Yeah. Well, status quo, as you said, is doing what you're doing, is staying in that comfort zone, right? It's safe, it's known, and yeah, I think getting out of the comfort zone, doing something different is really scary. But at the same thing, I think it's also the only way for you to get better, to progress, to learn and to grow again as an individual and as an organization, and so that's why I think it's important to think about, if you are in this environment of constant change, if you're going to stand still and embrace the status quo, you'll be sitting at the sidelines and things will happen to you. Or do you take advantage of the opportunity to change? And do you lean in? And are you going to, instead of being on the sidelines, on the playing field, right? And trying to shape the future yourself. So I think, yes, individuals want to stay in the comfort zone, but if you can support them, and if they can see there's an opportunity for them to try out different things, to test and learn to get better at what they're doing, then they see that the sky is the limit once they do that. But it's an evolution and it's a process. And I think in organizations, I think the right environment is important to stimulate that. But yeah, I think we all like to be creatures of habit.
Correct.
The challenge is that we're going to be extinct if we're going to stay with the same habit, right? Because the world around us moves around so quickly that you know, it's, you need to choose, make a choice, right?
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
And in your journey, as you work with board
Mhm.
leaders
Mhm.
to transform, can you
Yeah.
share with us some of your challenges and some of your learnings?
Yeah. Well, I think it's when you want to transform and you want to change, it's about, as I said, it's about having a choice. And often organizations are doing really well. They are kind of, you know, excelling in what they're doing. They're growing very fast. And then, of course, you become in a situation where you become a bit complacent, right? Because there's no burning platform. Why would I change? So I think that leaders that really are future focused, and I think that are very much transformative in their mind, they will always want to get better, right? At getting better. And the thing is that I think that's important to have. If you have leaders that think they're very comfortable, I think it's also making them aware that you can better change out of a position of strength, right? Then you need to change when it's too late. And we've seen organizations that if you think about Nokia or Kodak or whatever, that completely hit the wall and didn't do it. So I think it's making people understand, the leaders understand that they are doing well, but getting better, right, is even better. And who doesn't want to help shape the environment they're in, right? So I think as a leader, you can be a leader or you can be a follower, right? And it's about, again, that choice they need to make. But that it also means that you need to support them, right? Be there with them and help them to kind of build the muscle, as we always say, from within, to equip them, right, to be the best they ever can be in an environment of constant change and uncertainty.
Well said. And you know, from the world of startups, we've got a new word called pivot.
Yeah.
It's really transformation.
Yeah.
But when it comes to big companies,
yeah,
what goes into top management understanding or realizing it's time to pivot or transform?
Yeah. Well, I think the signs often, I think, are there, right? It's margins are getting you know, narrower. I think there is the pressure on price in general. I think there's inflation. I think you name it, right? The environment today, I think, puts a lot of challenges to organizations where they can't keep operating the way they are if they want to, right? I think the environment is forcing them. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it is tough. It is difficult. You need to make choices, right? You need to think of doing things differently. And I think doing things differently is already, I think, changing the game. So, and often organizations are having a certain metabolic rate that has worked well, but doesn't keep up with the pace of change. So I think it's a lot more difficult to mobilize, I would say, large organizations, but it is totally not impossible, provided you have mobilized the entire organization, not just the top, right? Because then it's not going to work.
Great response. Thank you. And my next question to you is that how do you, Anouk, support company boards for their human transformation?
Yeah. Well, I'm a strong believer that if you think about it, with the environment that is around us, one of the things more and more, and we see it with, you know, digital transformation and obviously the various industrial revolutions, where I think now we're at the point where I think it's man versus machine, right? And all of that. You see that this notion of talent is becoming more and more scarce. I think that's one. So again, people can't get to their knowledge workers in the same way they wanted to, because again, the environment is changing, so knowledge is changing. So how do you make sure you get talent, not just for now, but in the future? The second thing is, with what happened with COVID and the pandemic, but just in general around us, employees' needs and wants have changed, right? And in the past, you would interview an employee. Now an employee interviews you as an organization, because they want to work in organizations that are aligned to their purpose, to their values, to what impact they can make to society. So you have all of that happening, and then thirdly, if you want to be innovative and creative and transformative, you need to make sure you create have organizations that are able to voice opinions and ideas, and that is inclusive and creative and innovative and all of that. So I think organizations, if they want to really future-proof themselves, the culture is extremely important, and the people are extremely important. And unfortunately, in the past, people, were a bit seen like, okay, it's just an asset, right? It's the human resources side of the organization. And culture was always seen, that's something fluffy, right? We're not sure what that means, but culture is, okay, people are just, working together, and that's in a certain way. So I think boards have, and not just boards, but executive teams more and more are seeing that if they want to really deliver upon their purpose or their strategy, the key to success are going to be people and culture, right? And so I think what I try to do in my role is help boards and executive teams on that journeys around how do you put people and culture on the strategic agenda, but also how do they as a board set the tone of the culture they're trying to create, and how do they really play a role in ensuring they can access to the best talent they ever can be. So it was less of a, I would say it was less of a focus in the past. I'm not saying it wasn't there, but now people and culture can be a game changer, right? For an organization that does it really well, which perhaps wasn't the case in the past. So hence where I think my role comes in helping, to build again that muscle, right? In the organization that was there perhaps less before.
Very well said. And yet, post the pandemic, the new two words in the world are the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
As a top human resources leader in the world, what are your thoughts on the Great Resignation, and why is this happening?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of talk about it, and people might agree with it or not, but it's interesting because I saw some research recently, and it was saying that in just after the pandemic, I think more than close to 50 million of people, right? I think, and it was from the US, are leaving their company and their positions over a period of 12 months, which is, I think, almost 10 million more than it was, or even 10 million more than it was the year before. And the key reason for doing is the environment and the fact of being respected and the culture. And so, as I mentioned before, people needs and wants have changed because the pandemic has not just probably myself, but yourself as well, made you rethink. It was a bit of a reset. What is important in life, and how do I want to spend my life? And guess what? My life is not just work. It's about how do I bring work and family together, and how do I do it in an environment that cares for me, that feels for me, that grows me, that nurtures me, where I can be the best person and best version of myself that I always wanted to be. And that is very new, because through the pandemic, people have also seen that some organizations haven't taken empathy and care in the way they've dealt with people, right? So I think that those next generations, it's even for them more important, because they don't just think only about their environment as such, but they also want to make sure what's my organization doing around purpose and what impact they have on society. So I think the priorities, Ashutosh, have changed. And I think now employees are more vocal of what's important for them, not in the short term and the long term. And then that makes you rethink, what am I doing? Correct. Is this the organization that I feel is respecting my values and bring the best out of me? Probably not, right? So then let's do something else. So I think there's been created a certain empowerment and assertiveness that perhaps we didn't see before. And I think it's good because it also forces organizations to up their game, right? So I think in that regard, I think the pandemic has created a big shift in the way how organizations look at people and culture in a different way that they did before, which is, I think, again, a good
But yet, what happens, I mean, I'm much older and therefore my management practices may be old. But what happens to management by walking around the coffee machine conversations, the water cooler conversations, sitting together in the cafeteria, discussing? What happens to the human element of working together?
Yeah, well, I think even more than ever, I think being connected is even more important, because the thing is now in today's environment, with the great resignation, and I think we talk a lot about hybrid working and remote working and working flexibly and all of that. I think people still want to have that connection, right, with the organization, with the purpose, with the value they can bring with the people. So I think it's the office and the connections is a new way of connecting than what we did before. In the past, people came to the office to do their work. Correct. Now I think they come to the office to connect. And I think it's extremely important, because organizations all have their culture. You want that to continue, right? Even in a remote, in a hybrid setting. And as a leader, I think that personal contact and that managing by walking around, you still do it, but it might be a virtual working around, right? Or it's not just a coffee, but might be a virtual coffee. So I think it forces us all, right, to work differently, but that doesn't mean less impactful. I think it's working more intentional around how do you spend your time. But I think the human touch is becoming even more important, because every organization needs to humanize themselves even more, right, and overcompensate because of the environment that we're in. So I think I don't think that your approach would change. I think it's just how you do it might be different, right? Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Anouk, now let's move to a few conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know you do have done a lot of work in this area.
Yeah.
Let me start by asking you that there is a lot of talk about DEI around all over the world. How much is actually being achieved?
Yeah, I think it's a very provocative question, because it's true. I think there's lots of conversation, and I must say, I think what I'm seeing over the years, there's a lot more clarity around what diversity means, right? In the past couple of years ago, decades ago, it was about gender. Right now, I think people are starting to appreciate that diversity is about the personality someone brings, right? The race, gender, ethnicity they bring, but then there's all the experiences and the education they have, and then the environment they're in, right? So diversity it's like an onion. There's so many layers to it, and I think more and more people are starting to have a more holistic view on diversity, because they also appreciate that diversity and diversity of thought just is good business sense, right? Because all of our clients and everyone we deal with is complex. So I think that's the first thing. I think there's a better sense of that holistic approach and understanding, right? The challenge is that you can have diversity but no inclusion, right? It's like diversity have a seat on the table, but inclusion gives you a voice. So yes, you can have all that diversity, but if you don't create an environment where people can voice that diversity, express themselves, then you can't create innovation or creativity, or you can't really make it a better business case, right? So and I think that's the part with inclusion, is I think we need to ensure that it's not just talk about we are inclusive, but it's you act, and what you measure and what you prioritize is also inclusive. And for me, a lot of this depends on a couple of things. There's no silver bullet, right? Because I think there's not. But the fact that still a lot of people are feeling we're not inclusive means that, first of all, there's the role of the leader. I think leadership is crucial in all of this. And leaders are crucial in everything you do, right? Is, you know, bringing the people and the culture together with the purpose and the strategy. It's always leaders that need to translate, right? It's leaders that set the tone, but it's also leaders that that create an inclusive environment. It's those that create that there's an environment where there's psychological safety, right? Where people can voice their opinion, where there is this environment where you empower people to give up, where you give each other feedback, where in fact you create an environment where people can be themselves and you respect them in the way they are, right? So I think leadership is one, and the second thing for me is also this notion of the HR ecosystem, right? Because yes, you can have diversity, you can be inclusive, but if you're not going to be inclusive in all your people practices, then it's never going to work, right? So I think, yes, it's a long answer on your story that, are we doing enough? No, we don't, because I think we're often still set in, again, the old way of doing things. And this is about opening it up, but there's no silver bullet. It needs to happen at various levels, with leaders playing a key role, my sense.
Well said.
Yeah.
So my next question, and this is from the perspective of the millennials and the Gen Zs, who are the new young leaders. I have a lot of respect for them. And, you know, I'm probably from the baby boomers generation. But when I look at young people, you know, they bring a breath of fresh air.
I agree.
As a senior HR leader, what are your thoughts on how they view diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, my view, I love that the generation of next leaders, and one of the things I'm very fond about is reverse mentoring, because I mentor a lot of people through, and I still do it through my career, but I also like reverse mentoring because I like some of that younger generation mentor me as well, right? Because I want to know what's on their mind and all of that. And what I do realize is that, again, what they value is very different. And as we mentioned before, they will not join organizations where they don't feel that people are at the center, where they don't feel that the organization wants to make an impact in society, right? Or where an organization doesn't care about climate change. So the thing is that I think for them it's probably an environment that it's obvious, right? They want to work in an environment where they can kind of, again, bring their best self to work. So I think that's why it's so important for organizations, if they want to attract and develop and even more retain that generation, it's, again, to up their game, because they value different things. And in my view, they're very passionate about organizations that don't just tell the words, but act upon it. And live it every day. You know, when they look for joining an organization or a role, they don't think about the way we did it a couple of, you know, years ago or decades ago. Their purpose and values are at the center, right? And I think that reflects then also a lot on the culture of the organization they want to join. If diversity, equality, and inclusion is not part of it, I'm not sure that's the organization they want to be in.
Very interesting. And my last question to you now, and this is, Anouk, for the many, many young people who will listen to us. Based on your vast experience all over the world, you're being an HR leader, your thoughts on DEI, what would you say are 3 lessons you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
Well, from my own journey to start with, I would say I think that when you're young and you have a career to go for, I think it's important to have some idea around what is the destination you want to go to, right? I like quotes. So Alice in Wonderland is another one, right? Where she's lost in the maze and she finds the cat and she said, where do I go? And they say, well, if you don't know where to go, then anyway is the right way. So I think for the generation that is up and coming, I think having clarity of what your destination is important. You don't need to, all the directions, but have it be in line to your purpose, right? Have it be aligned to your values, and I think equip yourself and then go off doing it. Second thing is that in today's environment, it's always important to have mentors, right? People that can help you through that journey, and I've always been very fortunate to have had people that I could use as a sounding board, and so I think equip yourself with a mentor as you kind of go through that destination. That is one. Second thing is, like, we live in a VUCA world. There is constant change, so staying relevant is important. So that learning agility is extremely important, and I think that the more and more the softer skills, they're the ones that rule. So keep, I would say, transforming yourself as an individual, right? As you go along is the second thing. And the third thing that I would also say is that throughout all of my conversations we had so far, we spoke quite a bit about leaders and the role of leaders in all of this. And I always talk about every leader has a shadow, right? And your shadow is a bit your brand. The brand called you, right? Where that's what you do, right, Ashutosh, as well. So we all have a brand. Correct. And our brand is a shadow we cast. So I think everyone should really think about what is a shadow you want to cast. And that's not just what you say, but how you act, what you measure and what you prioritize. And I think all of that represents your brand, and stay true to that brand and be authentic. And I think that is extremely important as you go through, and don't compromise on that brand, because you are who you are, and you're passionate about certain things, but you're also in the spotlight as a leader. You're being watched all the time and people follow your direction, so your shadow casts very, very long and very far away. So be mindful of that. So I would say these would be the three things that I would share.
Fantastic. And Anouk, on that note, and your three wonderful lessons, know what is your destination, align with your values and your purpose, have your mentors, because they will help you to stay relevant, they will help you to learn all the time, and finally, know your shadow, know your brand, know what your shadow is going to cast about you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again, and good luck.
It was a true pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.